Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm excited to have Stephanie Parkyn joining us. Stephanie has been involved in the group before as author for the day, so great to have her back again. Stephanie grew up writing stories from an early age in a book-loving family in Christchurch, New Zealand. She had a rewarding career as an environmental scientist, but is now a historical fiction author with the love of travel, art, and nature. She is curious about human motivations behind the events of history and aims to illuminate women's experiences in her writing. After 10 years living in Australia, she has returned to New Zealand and writes for her home overlooking the sea in Coromandel Peninsula. Sorry, someone's coming home, I think, and my dogs are barking at the people coming home and going crazy.
Being greeted by the dogs.
Yeah. And Stephanie's first novel, Into the World, was published to wide acclaim in 2017 and longlisted for the Tasmanian Book Prize. Josephine's Garden, based on the true story of the woman who became Napoleon Bonaparte's Empress of France, was published in 2019. And The Freedom of Birds is her latest novel. There's my copy there. And just want to mention that if anyone's watching and type a question to Stephanie, they'll have a chance to win a copy of The Freedom of Birds, thanks to Alan and Unwin. So thanks so much for joining us, Stephanie. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about The Freedom of Birds.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jackie, for having me on. It's lovely to have this opportunity. And yes, The Freedom of Birds is my latest novel, and it's the third time I'm delving into French history. But this one is about two young men who are French storytellers. So they're traveling storytellers, and they're going through the lands that the Brothers Grimm fairy tales are in, and they meet up with a runaway girl, and all three of them form their own sort of performing troupe, and it's their own journey of how do they find a family, how do they find home, a sense of belonging somewhere as they go through this turbulent time in history. So this is set at the fall of Napoleon's empire. In Josephine's Garden, it was the rise of Napoleon that I was sort of happening in the background. And in this one, it's really what's it like for the little people, the ones that are getting caught up in his wars, and what's it like for those that are oppressed in those areas where he is, his empire now reaches. So yeah, we travel into parts of Germany, into Venice and Italian theatres, and also into Paris and the battlefields outside of Paris.
And I was really interested in the time era that you wrote this in. I think there's probably not a lot of books out at the, like a lot of books out at the moment, historical fiction seem to be around World War One or World War Two, or this, I don't think I've seen as many around the era that you've written in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and this was a part of history that I wasn't really familiar with. I had heard of Waterloo and the British and Napoleon's interactions, but not what was happening in the rest of Europe. And it's really this Russia and Prussia and Austrians, all that is really contributed to the demise of Napoleon's empire. And I knew none of that before going into this. I didn't even realize that Paris had been invaded or, any of those things at that time. So it was a real learning curve for me, which it always is with my books, because I didn't have a history background. So I'm learning a lot of it as I go. But I just find the stuff that's interesting to me. And it's an important time, I think, because it's that start of the democracies as well, with the French Revolution. And how difficult, what's really shown up for me is how difficult change is and how long it takes to bring in any changes. Like the French went from the overturning the monarchy to in a few years, bringing back in basically a dictator. So, yeah.
All very interesting. Yeah, I'm
Mm.
just wondering if you got a little bit of your book you'd like to read to us.
Yes, sure. I'll read you a bit. Saskia is the character on the cover.
And a lovely cover, I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, and I love the Harlequin pattern, which matches the character's theatre origins, and they actually did really well getting the colouring right for the girl's hair and description. So I was really pleased with that. She has quite a traumatic experience through her early life, and she's actually been abandoned to the circus by her mother. And that circus family forms a great family for her, but then she's stolen away from that. But she ends up with these two travelling French storytellers, and I'll just read you a little section where she's appraising them. They talk about me as though I'm not here, Saskia thought. The two men so caught up in their imaginings. The lute player wanted a theatre, he said. He wanted to put on shows. She knew the tale of Little Red Riding Hood, as Svetlana had told it to her long ago, and they had acted out the parts, taking turns at being the grandmother and the wolf. Svetlana would lie back with a shawl around her and snore like an old woman, and Saskia would be the giggling wolf who loved to pounce. Or she would be the innocent child, full of questions, and Svetlana the wolf with all the answers. She had said it was a warning to gullible girls not to be tricked by charming wolves in disguise as she tucked her into bed. A lesson for girls not to stray. Even then, Saskia had wondered, where were the tales for young boys, warning them not to become wolves? Saskia had no intention of appearing on any stage. Imagine it. She would be a ripe plum, low-hanging and easy for father to pluck. Never again. She would not be a Little Red Riding Hood to anyone's wolf.
Thanks for sharing that. That was good. I'm wondering why you decided to write about that era and what interested you in it.
Yes, well, I came to it through my first novel, Into the World, and that was based on a true story. So that brought me into this world, really, because the woman that I wrote about in this, Marie-Louise Girardin, she was a true French woman who disguised herself as a man and journeyed around the Pacific on one of the early voyages of exploration. And this happened at the time of the French Revolution. So it was a wonderful chance to sort of discover for a start why she might have done that, what happened in her life, and what we learnt, or what we know of her from what others have written about her, is that she gave up a child. She hadn't been abandoned by a lover, and her family had discarded her. So she had to give up her child, and her escape plan was to go on this boat. So that was my first novel, and that really took us through the age of the French Revolution. And interestingly, a gardener and a botanist on that ship drew me into the second one, which was Josephine's garden, because they went on to be involved with Napoleon and Josephine. The gardener was her gardener at Malmaison. So I already had those true, real characters that I already really liked, and I could carry them on and also learn and tell the story of Napoleon and Josephine. And then I wondered what would have come of this woman's child that she gave up when she went on this journey. And that's really how this one came about, because it was really Remy's story. He is the baby that she gave up in the first book, and he is now a young man. We actually meet him first when he's a teenage boy, 16-year-old, in the sort of prologue. And his mother has come back, but that situation doesn't stay that way, and he ends up running away. And it's his issues he has with his mother and the abandonment and betrayals that he sees in his growing up through the journey of the story of the book, that that we follow, as well as his faithful friend Pascal, who flees with him, and of course Saskia, who I just read the little bit about too. So it kind of completed for me the story of these characters, because they all make little cameo appearances from time to time, but they're individual, separate stories, and they just set at that time of, you know, following the French Revolution and Napoleon era.
And what about research? How hard or easy was it to find information about that time?
Yeah, so Napoleon and Josephine, lots has been written about them. So my trouble with that one, or my, you know, what I needed to do was to make sure I had everything correct and them in plausible places that they needed to be in the historical record. With Into the World, I didn't have any of her writings at all, because she left no trace of herself. But there were journals of the expeditioners on the voyage that she was on, and they had been suspicious about this steward that was on board, and they had written that down in their notes. And so I extrapolated a bit from that, and made her connected to the gardener and the botanist, and yeah, so I could piece little pieces together for that one from true historical records. And the third one, The Freedom of Birds, is much more about total fiction. So now I've got total freedom in a way, because I don't know what would have happened to her child. Like the foundlings of that day, there was like 80% mortality of infants. So the chances of them surviving were incredibly slim, but I wanted to give him a more hopeful possible life, and really explore those unconventional families that build out of, you know, abandoned children. There's lots of orphans through this book. The Comédie Italienne in Paris, the theatre that they were based at, I've made that kind of a sanctuary for orphans. And yeah, so, and the theatres are that kind of mishmash of all sorts of people, and you're joined together by a common interest, and yeah, these different friendships and families that form out of that time, I thought would be really interesting to look at.
Yeah. And we've got quite a few people watching, which is really great. Just reminding people watching, if you do have any questions for Stephanie, please type them in comments and I can read them out, and you'll have a chance to win a copy of The Freedom of Birds, thanks to Alan and Unwin. Kirsten has mentioned what a great title The Freedom of Birds is. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yes, it's quite a funny story, because it wasn't going to be called that at all the whole way through. It was The Lost Children, and it was like right in the last proofreading stages when my publishers suggested a change. So I had to madly think what could do, and I came up with huge lists of possibilities. And I guess The Freedom of Birds, there are a lot of birds brought up in the story. There's sort of those nature references, and also because the characters are trying to find home. Migratory birds are sort of part of that. They notice these migratory birds throughout, and I think that's interesting that, you know, yes, birds have this freedom to go anywhere they want to, but they often follow very pre-described routes, and they, you know, return home. So that's sort of what my characters were doing. They're pushed and pulled. They want freedom and independence, but they're also drawn back to the people they've left behind. So that's kind of where I came to it in the end. But it was a bit fraught.
Yeah. No, and Kelly has mentioned, we already said about what a beautiful cover, whether you had any input in the design or...
Not really. That was they did ask me for some, you know, inspirations or bits and pieces that I might contribute, but I actually had no idea how they were going to deal with it, because it does have all these sorts of different things going on in the storyline, from the Brothers Grimm German villages to these Venice and the theatres. So I think they did an awesome job. It was Lisa White, shout out to her, because just coming up with the idea and the colours of the
colours
pattern
and then even the bottom part, if you want to lift it up a little bit higher, the bottom with the boats and all that as well.
Yeah,
really
that's
good.
right. It's a classic sort of Venice scene. And and even the girl looks like she's turning and running away. Actually, that was something I did have. They had her facing two possible directions, so, so I had choice over that, which direction she was facing.
No, it's very stunning. I bet you're very pleased when you saw it.
Yeah.
And Sharon wonders if you have a writing routine and whether you write every day.
When I'm in the creative phase, then yes, I do. I kind of partition up my year probably into different zones. So when I'm, got editing to do from the publishers, it's usually very prescribed set times. So you'll have a month to work on the copy edit, for example. So during that time, I'm fully on that, and it takes I'm probably 7 days a week just working on that, because you want to have as much time as you can to work on those edits. And then in between that, you've got time to go back to the other work that you might be working on. So there's a structural edit, copy edit, proofread. So there's all those sorts of editing stages, and in between each of those you've usually got a month or a couple of months, so they're good chunks of time to get back to a creative project. It's hard I don't know if other authors can do it, but it's hard to be sort of creatively working on one thing while you're also editing another thing, so I sort of have to chunk it apart like that. And I sort of read, when I start something new, I will read widely. So that can take up quite a bit of time at the start before I even start to play around with writing the words. And then when I get started, I also keep researching. So they both sort of feed into each other. And I guess, and then I will try and do writing every day, and for quite a solid chunk of time as well, because it takes a lot to get into that, and then each night you're thinking about them anyway, and you pick up new scenes in the morning, and you want to get it down before you forget. So
and I'm from that as well. Sharon also wonders how long it took you to write The Freedom of Birds.
This one probably about 4 years in total, so getting slightly quicker, because my first one took 7 years. So it's I had the idea for this one while I was starting to write Josephine's Garden, maybe even before that. I just had something popped in my head, so it was always there in the background that I might want to write his story next. So ideas sort of percolate away. And then sort of dedicated on this one probably 4 years.
And Kelly says she loves how writers are bringing such important historical events back to life with their books, and she's wondering what part of your research surprised you the most.
Oh, yeah. Well, there were lots of little things along the way, like the number of women that actually disguised themselves and went either to sea, like my first novel, or to war. So there was a lot of interesting stories that came up there. And also just the extent to what Napoleon and his empire was doing to these places like Venice. So, for instance, Carnivale that we think of with the masks and so quintessentially Venice, he banned that during his tenure or takeover. And that sort of made me think, really, this is trying to get at the soul of people, you know, when you get to their culture and you belittle their culture and you take stuff like that away from them, what does that do to them? So that's why my characters, who were they form a theatre, sort of clandestine group of politically aware artists, that storyline came out of finding that fact out and thinking, wow, what's that going to be like for the people living in Venice? Because, you know, you read these historical things about, you know, how many people died or whatever on this such and such battle, but it's all very clinical. It's not like, well, what actually would that be like to know that your children have been taken off to war and there's for some foreign emperor and you can do nothing about it, you know? So that's sort of how it came about.
Yeah. And you mentioned how like your future books have sort of come from something from a previous book. What are you working on at the moment? Is it linked to these as well?
No, I'm making a total breakaway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead in time. So I've been looking at the journals of Victorian era lady travellers. So it was like the first phase of women being able to get out by themselves, probably, and travel the world.
Okay.
On steamers and going on treks into you know, unusual, uncharted places for them. And a lot of them were writing about it. So it is a lovely change to have the actual words of these women to be able to, you know, sort of see what their worlds were like and, and what travel was at that time. And so I'm just in mainly the research phase at this stage.
No, that sounds interesting too. And Donna, she wants to say that she loves your necklace.
Thank you. That was a gift from a friend.
Very nice. Jill wonders what your favourite genre is to read. And Kelly wonders if there's a top read you had last year you want to share with us.
Yeah. So I do read a lot of historical fiction and I read mysteries as well sometimes because I do love that sort of not knowing everything and having to work it out as well. And yeah, I was really impressed. Had a lot of fun reading Karen Brooks's The Good Wife of Bath.
Oh yes,
I thought, that was great. And the book I'm reading at the moment actually is Cloud Cuckoo Land as well.
Okay.
Which again, he's one of my favourite authors from when he wrote the small things. Oh, it's gone out of my head now. But very masterful writing there. And but there's been lots of great books coming out, and so it's really hard to name a few, but I did really love the irreverent main character of Karen's last novel.
Yeah, I've got that one on my pile to read. Sabine wonders if you've ever interviewed a real life orphan as part of your research.
What a good question. No, I didn't do that. No, I guess I do have a friend, but I didn't actually ask her specifically. It's kind of hard to sort of ask that kind of question of people, you know. That is interesting. I guess I went for more what I think might have been the reactions of him, and looking more generally at what people share on opinion pieces and so forth in today's sort of situations as well. But I didn't.
Yeah. And Jill wonders if you've always wanted to be a writer.
Yes, I think so, because I always wanted to be one when I was very young, so 8 or 9, writing stories, and I loved it when we got set that at school. You know, you have to write a story, and
Yeah.
I think I was about the only person that did really love that. So making stuff up must have been like really important to me from an early age. But I did put it on the back burner for many years, worked as a scientist, and then decided to follow some of those more creative things. And just gave it a whirl and decided I was going to start writing a novel. It was actually a crime mystery novel in New Zealand. The first one has not been published, so just one of those stories that it takes a practice novel first. Yeah,
Something that you might go back to, or not?
Maybe I'm a bit afraid to read it now.
Yeah.
And plus, the problem with crime novels, I discovered, and they're very like the phone, even during the time that it takes you to write the novel, many years have come on, and phone technology
things change.
So it was like, you've got to be really quick with the contemporary stuff. That actually was one of the reasons I decided to go historical because, you've got a bit more time.
Yeah, true, yeah. And how hard or easy was it to get your first book published?
So I guess I went through all the effort of that first novel that I told you about just then, trying to get that one published. So I spent about 3 years working, sending it off incrementally, slowly, to each publisher, and didn't get anywhere. So I learnt from that, and I went the second when I was finally 6 years in or something, at the end of what I can do with the manuscript that I had, I made a list of possible agents, and I queried them, and I queried them all at one time. And I was really fortunate to get Gabby Naher, who took me on. She's at Left Bank Literary. And really then I worked with her for a bit, worked on the manuscript, and then she sent it out, and it got a maybe from Allen and Unwin. Okay. And I had to make a few changes, and they could perhaps see how amenable I was to being able to make changes and see if I could edit the novel that I had, or the manuscript that I had. So and then it was a yes at the end of that. So that was so very fortunate. It was long road to hoe when you count the total of me trying with another novel first. But the key for me was getting the agent. And I always say to authors, at least give it a go to get an agent. I know it's just as hard because there's fewer of them around, but you lose nothing by giving it a go first. If once you start querying publishers, you lose your chance with an agent because they've got no one left to send it to. So that's my advice. Always start with agents. You don't lose anything. Then carry on.
Yeah. And if you could be a character from any of your books for a day, what one would you choose and why?
Yeah, a lot of people are loving Columbina from this one, The Freedom of Birds, and she does stand out for me too, because she is full of life and passion, and she's very politically motivated, artistic, theatrical, and just, all around pretty awesome. So I'll be her.
Yeah. And what do you like to eat or drink when you're writing?
Oh, okay. I don't have any specific thing like that other than making sure I've got at least 2 coffees on the go in the morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes I write in bed, so I'll get a coffee, have it in bed, and I'll get the laptop, and I'll just, I might be writing till about 10 in the morning, and then I will try and do some exercise. Something like that.
Yeah. And what have you found so far the most difficult part of the writing process?
Probably the insecurity that comes with it, especially when you're in that first novel. You've been working a long time on a manuscript, and you sort of lose a bit of faith and direction and trust in yourself. So that's hard because you don't know if you've got anything or if anyone thinks it's any good. And then strangely, when they said it would be published, I then went into absolute fear that now people are going to read it. So it's kind of nonsensical, really. You really want people to read it, and then you're like, people are going to read it. So it doesn't make much sense. But yeah, it's probably the insecurity, and it doesn't go away.
That's what I was going to say. The more, I was going to ask, the more you write, does that get better or?
Yeah, well, not for me so far. I still think, I'm not going to be able to do this, or I can't, because sometimes you get asked things with the structural edits and they really make your brain, turn to try and how are you going to solve this problem. It's a wonderful challenge though too. So I do love that you've got that editor that really invests that time and gives you that feedback. So that was probably the greatest joy of getting published in the end is having that then two-way. You're not on your own anymore. You can have a bit of two-way discussion about stuff, and writers groups have also been great for me. I've really enjoyed the fellowship of the other writers that I've got to know through my journey of learning to write. And
that's great. And when you're writing, do you like sharing what you're writing as you go along, or you just wait till the end?
Not too much, no. I do prefer to wait till the end because I don't write very completely. It's a bit scratchy and I don't feel it's ever good enough even right at the end. But I'm pretty keen to keep it close to me, and I want to get that whole first draft done before anyone else has their input too. And I think that is another really important thing, just to find out what the story is. That's what I think of as the first draft. What actually is this that has come out of my subconscious? What am I trying to tell people here? And if you get too much info from others early on, you might not really understand what you're trying to say. I kind of keep it pretty close for the first couple of drafts.
And when you're writing, what do you find comes first, the plot, the characters, or the location?
I think it's always been the characters for this, because I started with a true person. So I was drawn to her, and then I was drawn to what happened to some of the other characters, and also again in this final one, I guess it's like what's happened to the boy, So yeah, I guess it's come from them, and I've just been, but I probably was drawn to those as a story idea too, because of these locations and the amount of travel that was bound up in the stories as well. So it's a little bit of both there. And then it's probably figuring out what the plot's going to be with fitting it around true characters or events that, that's the challenge. So that's probably the third behind the other one.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me today. It's been great chatting to you.
Yes, thanks for all you do, Jackie. It's amazing. You've put in so much work, and it's a fabulous Facebook page you've got going.
Yeah, I really enjoy talking to all the different authors. So thank you so much. Just wondering if you want to tell people how they can keep in touch with you.
Oh, yes, please do. My Facebook page is actually Steph Parkyn's Story Place, name that I came up with before I was published. So, there's that, or there's Instagram with just Stephanie Parkyn. And I have a website as well with a contact and email, and you can sign up to be a subscriber, and I will do giveaways from time to time. And that'd be lovely. I love keeping in touch with people, so I hope that you will be able to.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, and look forward to seeing your new books when they come out.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who joined in. Thanks for the questions.
Excellent.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
See ya.